everybody, my name is Joe. I'm from ICT Group and I would like to show you the options and possibilities of the built-in Wisej DataGridView. So let's get started. I'll create a new project and I'll choose the Wisej web application. The web page application, which will start with a single page. Let's call it test 01. Sounds like a good name. Takes a second or two. Okay, and here in the Solution Explorer, we see the project with just one page. Okay, let's open that page. And as expected, it's empty. We'll have to put a DataGridView on this page. So let's open the toolbox, search for DataGridView, there it is, and we drop it on the form. Okay, now let's dock it to the client area. Dock, fill. Okay, so we have an empty page with an empty DataGridView, no data. Let's see how it looks like. And as expected, no data, but we have a header row here, and this header row doesn't look good to me, so I'll change the theme. Currently, in the designer, I look at the Bootstrap 4 theme. I'll change this in the web.configs. Bootstrap -4. Okay, and now at runtime, the application will use the Bootstrap 4 theme as well. We see that the header has changed its color. Okay, so we're good to go and put some data into this list. For this, I'll write a little data class. We call this data, sounds like a good name to me. And we need some properties. Let's use an int, call it ID. Another property, let's use a string, call this text, okay. And a third property, we'll use a boolean and call this even. Okay, so now we have a data class. Let's go back to the code of our main page. Nothing special here, looks like WinForms. And so let's go back to the page and implement a page load event. First of all, we need some data. So let's do it like that. And we also need a data list. We'll use a binding list here. If you want to know more about the binding list, that's not part of this presentation. You'll have to Google for that. There's a lot of information online. So we fill that with the data class. Call it data list. Okay, that's fine. Data list. Okay, so now we have it. And we can add some data to it. Let's initialize it with ID. We use the loop variable. For the text, we'll generate some text. Number. Okay. And for even, we'll set this to I modular 2 equals 0. So every second data in the list will be even. Okay, now we'll have to hook up the DataGridView with the list. DataGridView 1 is the name, and the data source would be the data list. And now let's run the application. And there we go. Here's our nice little data grid. And we also have multi-selection already. We can change the data in here. Okay, that's already a nice step for now. But I don't want to call this ID. And I don't want to call this text. I want to change the headers. So how do I do that? I go back to the design view of the data grid, go to edit columns. We see there are no columns defined, but still at runtime the data grid view showed some data. So how does that work? The data grid view has a property called, where is it? How to generate columns. There it is. This is set to true. So at runtime, the data columns are used, the data properties are used as columns. Okay, auto-generated. Now let's go back to here, add a column. I would like to call this hashtag. And it's the property ID of our data class, and I call this column ID. Okay, so now I have this hashtag column, but I don't have the other columns. Let's run this again. And what I see is that the newly defined column is here, but the others are still there. Okay, now we go back to the auto-generate columns property and set this to false. Run again. And now we only have the defined column. Okay, that looks good to me. Let's add some more columns. Next column is our text column. I call this, what do I call this? I call this beer. And the property is the text property, and I give this column a name, column text. And we have a third property in our data class, which was a Boolean. So I choose the checkbox, and I call this checked, if I can type correctly. So the data property would be the even property, and I call this column even. Okay, but I think this property, this column is a little bit too wide. So I'll go to the width and put 50 in there. So no, that's too small. So let's use 60, 70. Okay, now I can read the title. That's fine. But this one is too wide as well. Use 50 here. Okay, and I would like to display the values in this column centered. How do I do this? I go to the default cell style, and what I see here is alignment. I use middle center. Okay. Now let's see what we've done, if everything works correctly. Yeah, it's centered. And we have our width aligned, and we have our titles. Okay, so that's pretty good so far. Let's look at some of the other properties of the data grid view. First of all, I think the row height is too high. So I would like to change this, and I go to the property, auto size, where is it? Auto size, rows mode. There it is. And I want to set this to all cells. Now, if I run again, the rows adapt to the height of the text or whatever is in there. If the text is wrapped into multiple lines, the row height will be adapted accordingly. Okay, what else do we have? We have the multi-select property. If I set this is currently set to true. I can set this to false, and now when it's set to false, I can only select one row at a time. Okay, that's no big deal, but I still was able to modify the data in the grid. I can go in there and type something or check the checkboxes. If I don't want the user to edit, I'll simply set the read-only to true, and that's it. Now it's not editable anymore. Then there is a really nice feature. Oftentimes you have two controls on a form. This grid on the right and, for example, a tree view on the left. And sometimes you want to adjust the sizes horizontally. So let's build a test case for this. Tree view. Now we have a tree view, and oops, that was not supposed to happen. So here's the tree view, but let's look at the document outline. The tree view is embedded in the grid. We don't want that. So I'll move this up one step. So now we have two controls on the page, which are separate. But I don't want this tree view on the top. I want it on the left side. Okay, now it's on the left side. So at runtime, maybe the texts inside the tree view are wider than the tree view itself. So I would like to grab it here and move it to the right. So how do I do that? I go to resizable edges. There it is. And I define the right edge to be resizable. Okay, now at runtime, I see the tree view on the left and my data grid view on the right. Now I can adjust the left side of, not the left side, I'm sorry. I can adjust the width of the tree view, but the data grid view is hidden behind the tree view. I don't want that. So how do I do that? I go to the Document Explorer and I change the order. Now the tree view is lower than the data grid view. I run again. And there we go. Now I can adjust the tree view and the data grid view will adapt the size. Okay, so that's already very nice. Resizable edges. Now let's add a context menu. Context, not coin text, context menu, there it is. Of course, context menu is an invisible control, so it's put underneath the designer. Now let's add some menu items. Number 1, number 2, that's enough for now. And I set the context menu property of the data grid view to this newly created context menu. Now let's run it. Right click somewhere on the data and I see the context menu. Nothing does happen yet because I have not implemented any event handler, but I already have the context menu hooked up to the data grid view. Very nice. So let's do something with the context menu. I go to the events, menu item clicked, and menu item clicked is a nice event to hook up actions to the menu item. First of all, we need to know what is the actual menu item, and I would also like to know what is the ID of the currently selected row, so I can execute actions depending on which row is selected in the grid. So how do I get the grid value? I know the ID is an integer, and I need a reference to the DataGridView, which is DataGridView 1. I know there's only one selected row because I have set multi-select to false. So I have the selected rows, and if there's selected rows, and if there's only one row selected, it must be number 0, index 0, row index 0. What column do I like to see? Column ID, and I have to put the index there. And this one has a value. Okay, and now this doesn't work because if I hover over this, I see that value is of type object. So I have to cast this to an integer. And there we go. The squiggly lines are gone. So how do I deal with the menu? Let's use an alert box. Alert box is basically like a message box, but it automatically disappears after a few seconds, and it always shows up on the bottom right side of the screen. So what do I show here? First of all, I would like to tell the user, you clicked ID. This is the ID. And the menu item was what? Now I go to the menu item event args, e.menu item, and the menu item has a text. So I want to display that. Now let's see if this works. Here's our grid. Select number 4, right menu item, and now watch what happens on the bottom right side. ID 4, menu item was menu item 1. Now I go to number 6, right click, menu item 2. I see ID 6 and menu item 2. So this works perfectly. Now I go to right click on number 2, menu item 1, and it says click item 6. Oops, that's not the right one. Item 6 is still selected, and I right clicked on number 2, but the selection didn't change. So basically the selection on the right click did not change. What do? I go back to design mode, select the DataGridView properties, scroll down to right click selection. True. Now I run again, and I right click on number 6. So that this did work already in the previous version. Now I go to number 2, right click, and you see the selection has changed. And now if I execute it, ID 2, that's the correct one. Okay, so we fixed this problem. What also bothers me is that on the left side we have this empty row. That's called the row header. I don't want this, so I check on row headers visible, false, and now if I run the application, the row header is gone. Now it looks like I would like it to look, and I'm satisfied, so let's go on. Oh, what I forgot to tell you, there's one more nice thing at runtime. At runtime, when you look on the right here, there's these 3 dots, and if I click on that, I see the names of the columns, and now I can make the columns visible or invisible just by selecting here. That's a nice thing. I can also, when I go back to the columns editor, I can can set this one to not visible, but is still visible in the visibility menu. The visibility menu is that menu that appears when you click on the three dots. So it's in the visibility menu, but currently it's not visible. That sounds good. Let's try. The check column is not there. I click on the three dots and I see that it's not activated. Now I activate it and there it is. So the column is still there, it just was hidden. Okay, and the last thing that I would like to tell you, to show you, is the Tools menu, which I love. The Tools menu, let me just implement a tool and then you will understand what this means. I added one, choose an image. I don't have any images defined in the project, otherwise they would appear here. So I use one of the built-in themes. That one sounds good to me. Another one, this one, and just for the sake of it, let's use a third one. I like that. Okay, the tools appear here at the top. And at runtime, of course, they are still there. And I can use them to perform any actions, whatever I like. Okay, but I don't want it to be on the right side. I want it to be on the left side. So what do? I go to the properties of the DataGridView. The tool position is at the top, but they're shown on the right. So I go to the collection, and right here, position right, I use position left, and position left. Or let's leave one of the tools on the right side and two on the left. Okay, this is how I can order the component tools. But I can also use left for the whole tools position. Now I have one at the bottom and the two on the top. It's a little bit misleading because the tools that are on the top now have a position left, but yeah, I think you can live with that. Okay, that was the tools. And I think I don't have any other things to show that are of great interest. You can work your way around the various properties, and we can also refer to the documentation. All these properties are explained there. You can get to there by going to wisej.com. Support documentation, and there's the API, and you can search for DataGridView and find all the properties. Okay, that's almost everything I would like to tell you. So let's add one thing that we already saw earlier when I put the tree view on the grid. It happened to land as a child of the grid. So let's take advantage of this and use the toolbar. Okay, there it is. Now we go to the document outline, and I see the toolbar is a child of the DataGridView. So the DataGridView, if I remove the doc fill and set it to doc num, you can see that the toolbar is right here, and it's part of the DataGridView. When I remove the DataGridView, the toolbar moves with it. Okay, so but that doesn't look fine, so let's go back to the fill mode. edit the buttons. Let's have one button here. I don't have any fancy images, so let's use one of these built-in images just for the sake of it. And there I have my toolbar. At runtime it looks like this. Very nice. Okay, there it is. So I can put buttons here that perform actions on the grid only. Okay, I hope you liked this little presentation. The DataGridView, very powerful control. And so have a nice day. See you next time. Bye-bye.